Hello, I'm Turi, and welcome to the attic. So coming from doing the Goddess of Hyrule project, and then all of Nicole's resin projects, we really kind of wanted to mix the two using a mold and resin, and this is what we came up with. This is Chillrend from Skyrim. The 3D models used are directly from Skyrim Special Edition. We were able to convert the file to an STL, then chop it up and add registration keys. We also had to decrease the Z-axis as the original file was very thin and we needed a bit more material to work with. Once all three prints had finished, we started the post process by sanding. PLA does not sand very easily, so we only did rough sanding at this point.
This is the worst, and this is why Turi needs to be home. Because get off of work, try to do some work on a day off, and my dumb hands can't open the stupid I loosened it. I got it.
.3M acrylic green spot putty is great for filling layer lines quickly. A generous amount was applied and much sanding was done as soon as it dried. Filler primer spray paint was perfect to finish the sword. With a bit more sanding, the sword is very smooth and had the finish we needed to cast it. To add detail that does exist in the game's texture files, not the 3D file, which then wouldn't have been printed, we laser cut a thin piece of acrylic and glued it to the sword. Creating the mold form was done by hot wire cutting insulation foam into a simplified shape of the sword. It will provide good shape for the mold to be poured into. Hot glue was the best semi-permanent solution to make sure the sword half doesn't move when the silicone is poured in. We used Smooth-On Umu 30 silicone to create the mold. 2 pours were needed to fill the shape. When cured, we removed the mold from the foam and found that it worked very well. Only a small amount of cleanup was necessary. Creating the metallic look of the handle and hilt was very important to us. To create a cheapo cold cast technique, Nicole paints dry pigment powder on the mold. This had mixed results. The deep blue ice color for the blade had to be right. Luckily, we found the right amount of blue alcohol ink and blue pigment powder to add to the resin, and it came out great. The resin we used is not ideal for this application. It's a tabletop resin that when cured still has some flex to it. We found later that a urethane resin like Smooth Cast 325 would be more appropriate because it is transparent but will stay more rigid. The sword even now can flex under its own weight over time, but it's what we had and it works well enough for a decorative sword. So we used a single mold rather than a two-part mold or anything more complicated. Just because of that, it's much simpler to just use a single mold and pour two pieces that are identical and glue them together, just like this. We waited for the resin to set overnight. When we pulled it from the mold, we found that there was some cleanup to do. An X-Acto knife took care of most of it. The sword halves were glued together using UV resin. The sword is transparent, so even in the center of the join, light could reach and cure the resin. UV resin worked very well in this application, as it's probably more transparent than even the epoxy resin is. Since the game 3D models didn't include detail in the hilt or pommel, it was added by carving the sections out using a rotary tool. Some basic shaping on the blade and handle was necessary. The work on the handle did remove the layer of pigment powder in a few places. Painting would be necessary later. One side had fewer mistakes and became the hero side. All shaping was done on the non-hero side first to test techniques and tooltips. Light finishing was done during the shaping process. The plastic polish 3-2-1 method showed that sanding with a coarser grit was necessary. The carved details on the hilt and pommel were masked for painting the hilt and handle. Model paints are what we have, and so that's what we used. Once this was done, a clear finish was sprayed on the newly painted sections to add durability. Once painting was finished, we did a bit more polishing on the blade. UV resin was applied to the carved details on the hilt and pommel, as polishing this section would be time-consuming and may not result in the wanted finish. The results were better than expected, so I decided to use UV resin on the entire blade as well. The UV resin worked exceedingly well, and it gave the blade a crystal clear, transparent look. The transparent finish may not be accurate to the game, but it looks better in our opinion.